next guest, he's a numbers guy, and please welcome to the show America's accountant, Dan Geltrude. Dan, thanks for taking the time. Lots to really, I think, unwrap there as we get closer and closer to flipping the calendar. What are your thoughts about how this economy looks going in next year and what a presidential election might, or how that might affect it?
Well, let's start with this, Scott. I think it is far too soon for anybody to be taking a victory lap related to what's going to play out with recession. As you said before, we still have to wait for these rate hikes to work itself through the system. So as far as a recession, listen, we all want a soft landing. Is it possible? Of course it is. It's just too soon to make that call. Now, keep in mind that, yes, the economic signs are starting to point downward. What happens when those interest rates really start to bite? And as you said, is that when the Fed panics and starts to lower rates? Remember, inflation is very sticky, Scott. So I would really caution the Fed about even signaling for rate cuts for a while. Best case scenario, take your foot off the gas. Let's see what the economy does next.
It's funny. It's almost like these pundits, these traders, whether they be guys or gals, it doesn't matter. But they really trade like what they want to have happen, right? They're so wanting to see these rate cuts come to the fore that they're trading like that. And to my point earlier in the monologue, the Piper Sandler had that hope index, right? Housing, orders, profits, and employment. They're all starting to weaken. The first three, the HO and the P, the housing, orders, and profits, have definitely been weakening. And employment just started to show some cracks. So that can't be good. Now, as we get closer to that election and you start to see some of the effects of these rate hikes, these people that are calling for rate cuts, like I say, might get it, but not for the right reasons.
Well, if there's going to be rate cuts, look, I think part of that could very well be the political pressure, because it's an election year, to do something with those rates, because they're going to want to be able to spur on the economy. Look, the current administration has to run on something, Scott, right? So if they're able to convince the Fed to get those rates down, perhaps you get a little bit of the happiness index, that people are going to start feeling good and say, you know what, we'll give the current administration another shot. Of course, we have to see how much damage is done between now and then. To be honest with you, I'm not so sure that a rate hike is out of the question, depending on what happens with inflation. And of course, with the holidays coming up, Scott, let's see where these numbers come in with retail, right? Aside from the fact that people are using plastic and going further into debt, let's really see if people are going to truly spend this year.
Yeah, well, it's supposed to be $960 billion, almost $1 trillion for the holidays. We'll see if that actually happens, number one. Number two, going back to the rate cut things that we're now all talking about, believe it or not, I mean, doesn't that work at cross purposes of what the Fed's really trying to get done here? They've tightened monetary policy to bring that inflation rate towards that 2% level. But if they start to cut rates because of an election around the corner or something like that, that's just going to really loosen things up again, and that could cause inflation to rally.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. That's why I'm saying that inflation is very sticky. You have to really move forward here very cautiously, because it doesn't take that much to upset the apple cart. And let's also keep in mind, there's so many things going on geopolitically, like in the Middle East and Ukraine, that could totally be a game changer as to what happens next.
And I talk about the lag effect of that 2.25% rate hikes that still need to come through. There's also a large part of that last spending bill that hasn't been spent yet, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And let's never discount the ability for the federal government to spend more, which, of course, is inflationary. That's why I'm saying if the Fed is really playing it straight up and ignoring any political pressure, you could have a hike.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I'm going to end it on that one because I still think that's in the cards. We've had a few other, guys on the show and gals say the same thing. So appreciate you coming on. That's great stuff. Always a good conversation to have with you. Dan Geltrude coming to us from Nutley, New Jersey. Thanks, Dan, for being on the show. All right.